during the entire Christmas season. We go bang into Valentine's, the season of chocolates, the season of strawberries, and more importantly, the season of love. While Valentine's always uses chocolates and strawberries, there are lesser known evils that really work well too. Caramel is one thing that reeks and screams Valentine. In today's dessert, we are going to create a caramel blondie which has some nuts in between, creating that perfect Valentine's dessert to scream the love that you share. Let's get to creating it. Now, while a caramel blondie always requires a level of nuts in between, I'm using quite a unique pair of nuts. I'm using these gorgeous nuts, that's the Brazil nuts. Large, chunky, just chop them up roughly and they go right in between. We're going to get to preheating the oven to 180 degrees Celsius for a good 10 minutes, and in the meantime, let's get to creating the mix that nestles below. This recipe is really simple, and never ever hesitate to create a large batch that you can just munch on all through the week. To start off, I'm taking about 500 grams of salted butter, softened butter. I just allowed it to get to room temperature, and I'm going to take every last bit of it. Into that, I'm going to add about 700 grams of dark brown sugar, and that's typically required in a blondie. So in that goes. And we're just going to let both of them emulsify and get to that creamiest of textures. You can also use a steel bowl and a rubber spatula to get this done. I'm just going to allow both these to emulsify and get to the creamiest of textures, nearly 7 to 8 minutes. As we allow this to emulsify, and that's the only tedious part of getting the brown sugar and the butter to emulsify to the smoothest consistency. In between, in goes 2 caps of vanilla essence, and that's a typical requirement of a blondie. So 2 heaped teaspoons of vanilla essence. You can also add 3 if you like that sharp aroma. Start blending it back again on slow by adding in an egg at a time. So here I've got 4 whole eggs, and I'm just going to add an egg at a time to aid in the overall emulsifying of the entire process. While the 4 whole eggs have emulsified really well into this, you need to add 2 egg yolks just so that they give that additional richness into this creation. And allow it to whisk for another 2 to 3 minutes. With all the wet ingredients emulsified, in goes the dry ingredients. And out here I've got 500 grams of refined flour. Just sieve it once or twice and start to put it in. So put it in small batches because I'm not using a spatula to fold it in. So into 3 batches, allow batch 1 to go in and just emulsify with the entire thing. In goes the second part of the flour, just so that everything mixes really well together. Start off slow and go and increase the speed up. With the last batch of flour in, we're just going to let this entire perfectly blonde consistency of a blondie to emulsify for about 2 minutes before putting it into a sheet pan to bake. This mixture is dense and amazing, and now is the trick that we are going to employ out here. We are going to put half of this into a baking tray that I've lined the bottom with parchment paper and just grease the sides. You need to grease the sides because the caramel that we sandwich in between requires the sides to be greased. So half this mixture is going to settle at the bottom and we're going to layer it and flatten it out. I'm going to reserve the other half just so that I can put it on top after this has baked. I always go off the beaten track and do something new, something easy, yet with a twist to it. Just flattening it all out so that you get an even layer. This is ready to bake for the first part in a preheated oven at 180 degrees Celsius for just about 20 minutes. "20 minutes is all that's required to form that skin on top, which allows you to nestle the caramel as well as the Brazil nuts in between. The fine skin on top is perfect to slather some caramel sauce, and caramel sauce doesn't even warrant a recipe creation because I follow one of the most simplest of recipes. I use a 1:2 ratio, 2 parts of sugar to 1 part of cream. So I take 250 of sugar, allow it to melt and turn that amber gold liquid. Into that, I just add about 50 grams of salted butter and 125 mils of cream. Allow it to get nice and emulsified well together and just put it in a bowl on the side to set. You don't need to do too much for it at all. It's such a simple but gorgeous creation. And Valentine's Day is all about caramel, and in fact, you should use caramel on your ice creams, use caramel on your milkshakes. Just use it wherever you can. I'm going to slather this right on top, and finally we're just going to give it an overload of these crushed Brazilian nuts. So just open it up and put them all on top. It's about 200 grams of this. It's going to form that perfect nutty texture within. If you have a blondie like this with a nutty texture within, I often feel it's like a marriage which has a bits and pieces of everything combined. So Valentine in the making. So just put the last batch of the blondie mix on top, smoothen it out, and it bakes back in for 40 minutes. Don't be alarmed if any of the caramel seeps on the side. It just adds to that goodness that Valentine's brings. So smoothen this out right till the end to have that perfect nutty and gooey texture within. Most people often ask me what's the difference between a blondie and a brownie. I think a blondie, or I believe rather a blondie to be a no chocolate brownie. That's why it's blonde in color and it's got every texture within. You just replace the cocoa for vanilla and have a great dessert bar. "40 minutes at 180 degrees Celsius and your blondie ready." "45 minutes of baking at the most consistent of heat. This blondie is ready. The caramel and the Brazil nuts right in between is a perfect Valentine dessert bar. Now comes the most difficult part, where all you need to do is allow this to come down to room temperature, preferably 2 to 3 hours, and then cut it into those gorgeous squares. Use a wet knife because it's caramel, it tends to stick to everything. I hope you enjoyed creating this gorgeous Valentine treat. A blondie is a perfect dessert to share with your loved one. Don't forget to share loads of love by hitting on the like button, and as always, don't forget to subscribe.